There is a paradox in life that most overlook. The more we chase, the more we suffer. The more we hold on, the more we are held captive. True strength begins not in the gaining, but in the letting go. To detach is not to become cold, unfeeling, or indifferent. It is to rise above the illusion that control over things outside of us brings peace. It is to understand that the more we tether our worth to outcomes, people, praise, or possessions, the more we surrender our power. Imagine a man who clutches water in his hand. The tighter he holds, the more it slips through his fingers. This is how life works. Attachment to things that shift with the winds of time. Money, reputation, relationships, even health, invites fear, anxiety, and disappointment, for none of these are truly ours. We borrow them for a time, and time always collects. But to detach, to observe the world without demanding it bend to your will, is to discover a calm center, a grounded presence that cannot be shaken. When insults do not touch your ego, when loss does not dismantle your identity, when praise does not distort your sense of self, that is when you begin to wield quiet power. Detach not from life itself, but from your expectations of how it should unfold. Detach from the idea that you are owed anything. Detach from the belief that your value is found in things external. In doing so, you will no longer fear failure, because you will not define yourself by success. You will no longer be controlled by desire, because your contentment will no longer be bought by circumstances. This is not weakness. This is the most radical kind of power, the ability to stand in the midst of chaos and remain unmoved. The ability to say, I do not need this to be whole. I do not need that to be at peace. Detachment is clarity. It is the freedom to act with reason instead of reaction. It is the ability to choose principle over impulse. When you are no longer enslaved by your wants, you cannot be manipulated. You cannot be ruled by pleasure, nor crushed by loss. And from this freedom comes true influence. The person who cannot be bought cannot be broken. The one who expects nothing appreciates everything. And the one who lets go of control paradoxically becomes the master of himself. So release the illusion that power lies in possession, or in domination, or in winning. Real power is quiet. It comes when nothing owns you. It comes when you can walk away from anything, not in bitterness, but in strength. Detach, not to escape life, but to live it more fully, more wisely, and more freely. For it is in detachment that you no longer chase power, you become it. We spend much of our lives believing that strength is shown by how tightly we can hold on to people, achievements, possessions, or identity. We are told that to love is to cling, that to succeed is to obsess, and that to be someone of worth means never letting go of what defines us. But this is a misunderstanding of true strength. Holding on can become a prison, a form of self-imposed suffering disguised as ambition or devotion. What appears to be power is often fear in disguise, the fear of loss, the fear of change, the fear of emptiness. True strength is found in the willingness to let go, to release our grasp on what we think we need in order to be whole. When we cling to something, we are not in control of it. It controls us. The tighter we grip, the more our identity becomes entangled with the thing we refuse to lose. We fear its absence because we believe its presence completes us. This dependency gives away our inner power. A person whose peace is tied to an external outcome will never be truly at peace. Their emotional state will rise and fall with the tides of life, tossed around by forces they cannot govern. Consider a person who is desperately attached to their reputation. Every compliment inflates their ego, and every criticism cuts. They are not strong, even if the world sees them as confident. Their strength is hollow, built on approval. If that approval fades, they crumble. But the one who is able to let go of needing validation, who acts rightly without requiring applause, has power that no one can take from them. That person is rooted. They move from a place of purpose, not performance. It is the same with material wealth. Money is a tool, nothing more. But when we attach our sense of self to it, we become its servant. We begin to measure our worth by numbers, by comparisons, by what we own rather than who we are. This is not strength. It is a hidden weakness dressed in luxury. The one who can enjoy riches yet remain unchanged in poverty, who can give generously without fear of lack, who can walk away from comfort without anxiety, that person possesses a kind of quiet power that cannot be shaken. Even relationships, as sacred as they may be, are not exempt from this principle. Love that clings, that controls, that demands, is not love in its purest form. It is possession masked as care. When we need someone in order to feel whole, we are no longer free, and neither are they. But when we love without attachment, when we can say, I choose you, but I do not need you to be complete, we are practicing a higher form of strength. A love rooted in freedom, not fear. To let go does not mean to abandon. It means to release the illusion that anything external can truly make or break us. It is to recognize that all things are temporary, that seasons change, people leave, success fades, and even the body will one day weaken. But what remains through it all is the self, the steady observer who chooses how to respond, who can adapt without losing integrity. Letting go means trusting that we are enough without clinging to roles, labels, or attachments. It is a return to ourselves, and in that return we rediscover a source of strength that is not based on control, but on presence, awareness, and acceptance of reality as it is. To detach is often misunderstood. People equate detachment with coldness, emotional numbness, or disengagement from life, but this is far from its true nature. Detachment is not the absence of feeling. It is the presence of clarity. It is not that you cease to care. It is that you care without being consumed. Detachment allows you to see things as they are, not through the cloudy lens of desire, fear, or personal expectation. It is a form of disciplined perception where you observe reality without immediately reacting to it, and in doing so you reclaim your inner authority. When you are attached, your emotions are no longer your own. You become reactive, constantly pulled by what happens around you. A compliment lifts you, a criticism breaks you, a success inflates you, a failure crushes you. This roller coaster becomes your prison, and your mind is no longer still. You live at the mercy of circumstances and opinions, but detachment clears this fog. It gives you the space between stimulus and response, the space where your true power lives. With clarity, you can feel deeply but respond wisely. You can care without clinging and act without craving a specific outcome. In relationships, for example, attachment makes you needy and afraid. You begin to demand, to expect, to manipulate, all out of fear of loss or rejection. Detachment, on the other hand, allows you to love purely. You can appreciate someone's presence without needing to possess them. You can give without keeping score. This does not make the connection any less meaningful. In fact, it becomes more genuine, more enduring. You stop projecting your insecurities onto others and instead bring a calm, centered self to every interaction. In your work, detachment enables mastery. When you are obsessed with results, your mind is scattered. You are anxious about the future, disappointed in the present, and blind to the process. But when you act from a place of clarity, focusing on the work for its own sake, you unlock your full potential. Detachment frees you from the fear of failure because your identity is no longer tied to success. You become resilient, creative, and consistent, not because you don't care, but because you care in a deeper, steadier way. The same applies to your thoughts. An attached mind identifies with every passing idea and emotion. It believes every fear, it clings to every desire, it resists every discomfort. But a detached mind watches these movements without being swept away. It sees thoughts like clouds. They come, they go, they change, but the sky behind them remains untouched. Detachment allows you to witness the fluctuations of the mind without mistaking them for truth. You learn to pause, to examine, to choose, and this is where wisdom begins. Even in suffering, detachment does not mean denial. It means facing pain without exaggeration or resistance. You feel it fully, but you don't let it define you. You allow the experience to pass through you, without building stories that imprison you in victimhood or bitterness. Detachment creates space around your pain, space that allows healing to occur. Without this clarity, suffering becomes identity. With it, suffering becomes a teacher. Detachment is not about doing less or feeling less. It is about seeing more clearly. It is a disciplined presence that resists the pull of impulse, that pauses before reaction, that chooses the long view over the immediate craving. It is the quiet strength that allows you to sit in silence while the world shouts, and to move with purpose while others chase illusions. Where attachment narrows the mind, detachment opens it. Where attachment feeds confusion, detachment offers insight. It is not a withdrawal from life, but an engagement with it on deeper, more conscious terms. Expectation is the silent architect of suffering. It builds invisible frameworks in our minds, shaping how we believe the world should behave, how people should treat us, how success should unfold, and how life should reward our efforts. But life does not obey our private blueprints. It does not bend to our assumptions, no matter how righteous or reasonable they may seem. The gap between what we expect and what reality delivers is where disappointment, frustration, and resentment are born. The greater the expectation, the deeper the pain when life inevitably diverges from the imagined script. When you expect others to speak kindly, act justly, or love you in the way you want, you are placing your peace in their hands. You hand over your emotional stability to variables you cannot control. This dependency makes you vulnerable, not because people are inherently unreliable, but because your inner calm now hinges on the behavior of others. You suffer not necessarily because of what they did, but because of what you thought they should have done. Expectations become invisible chains, and the more tightly you hold them, the less freedom you have to move through life with grace and adaptability. Detaching from expectation does not mean abandoning standards or losing direction. It means removing the emotional demand that things must turn out a certain way in order for you to be okay. It is the difference between intention and insistence. You can aim for excellence, prepare with diligence, and hope for positive outcomes. But detachment means that your sense of self and inner stability are not shattered when life takes a different course. You accept reality not as a passive victim, but as a clear-eyed participant, adjusting your steps without losing your footing. Freedom begins in the mind, and the mind is never free while it is busy resisting what. When you live burdened with expectation, you are always in quiet conflict with the present moment. You are not experiencing what is actually happening. You are mentally comparing it to what you believe should be happening. This creates an internal tension that eats away at peace. Every moment is measured against an invisible standard, and very few ever measure up. Life begins to feel unfair, people begin to seem disappointing, and you begin to feel like a victim of circumstances that refuse to align with your inner narrative. Letting go of expectation allows you to see clearly, to listen fully, and to act without the weight of invisible emotional contracts. You become receptive instead of reactive. Each moment stands on its own, unburdened by comparison to the one that came before or the one you hoped for. In this openness, you find not only peace but presence. You are no longer missing life by constantly measuring it. You are in it, fully grounded and aware. This is where genuine appreciation takes root. When you expect nothing, everything becomes a gift. The mind that releases expectation becomes curious instead of judgmental. It asks, what is this moment trying to teach me? Instead of, isn't this moment what I wanted it to be? This shift transforms challenges into opportunities and delays into space for growth. You begin to trust the flow of life, not because everything goes your way, but because you are no longer emotionally dependent on it doing so. This trust is not blind optimism. It is a quiet resilience that comes from seeing clearly and surrendering the illusion of control. Expectation often masquerades as motivation, but they are not the same. True motivation is rooted in discipline and vision, while expectation is tied to entitlement and outcome. One empowers you to act regardless of results. The other enslaves your mood to the scoreboard. By letting go of expectation, you return to effort for its own sake, to virtue for its own sake. You act not because the world owes you a reward, but because acting rightly is reward enough. The one who desires nothing is the one who cannot be controlled. So long as you crave approval, validation, comfort, or recognition, you can be led, pushed, and manipulated. People, circumstances, even your own emotions become your masters. You chase pleasure and flee discomfort, always negotiating your principles for the sake of temporary satisfaction. But when you reach the point where your sense of peace no longer depends on what others give or withhold, you become untouchable in the most powerful way. Detachment from desire doesn't mean the absence of ambition or drive, but rather the refusal to be ruled by. The world knows how to control people who are desperate to gain or fearful to lose. Approval is dangled like a carrot. Fear is wielded like a stick. Systems of control rely on attachment to praise, to status, to comfort, to belonging. They flourish when people are afraid to stand alone, when they need something so deeply that they'll compromise their integrity to get it. But the person who needs nothing from the world cannot be bought. They don't chase flattery, nor do they fear criticism. They are guided not by hunger for reward, but by inner alignment. They cannot be bribed with pleasure or threatened with loss. To need nothing is not to retreat from life, but to step into it with full awareness. You begin to choose your actions based on what is right rather than what is rewarded. You become harder to predict because your behavior no longer follows the expected patterns of fear and desire. You say no when others would say yes to avoid discomfort. You speak truth when others remain silent to avoid conflict. You walk away when others would beg to stay simply because your peace is not up for negotiation. This is not arrogance. It is freedom. It is the posture of someone who has made their well-being a matter of inner discipline, not outer acquisition. A person who does not need the world to treat them a certain way has the capacity to love others more purely. They are no longer using others to fill a void or fulfill an image. It cannot be built on motivational slogans or temporary affirmations. It is forged in the quiet moments when you choose to stand firm rather than collapse, when you choose to breathe rather than react, when you choose to see reality clearly rather than through the lens of your attachment. Detachment teaches you not to run from discomfort, but to face it with open eyes and a steady heart. The more you practice this, the more resilient you become, not hardened, but calm, flexible, enduring. You begin to understand that nothing can truly be taken from you that defines who you are. Titles can vanish, wealth can evaporate, relationships can change, health can deteriorate, but the essence of who you are remains untouched by these fluctuations. You stop basing your inner world on what is impermanent. Instead, you root yourself in the values, principles, and clarity that stay constant even when life does not. This is the foundation of emotional resilience, not a shield against pain, but a deeper wisdom that keeps you upright when the winds of life try to knock you down. There is a quiet confidence in those who have trained themselves in this way. They are not loud, but they are steady. They do not boast, but they endure. They are not easily shaken because they no longer build their houses on the sand of fleeting experiences. They have stopped asking the world to keep them safe or make them whole. They have stopped expecting their feelings to always be pleasant or their journey to always be smooth. In doing so, they have found something far more valuable than comfort. They have found the strength to stand when others fall. True power is not the ability to control others, but the ability to govern oneself. It is not found in force, status, or recognition, but in self-mastery, the quiet, unshakable discipline of being in command of your thoughts, emotions, and actions regardless of external conditions. When the world is loud, chaotic, and full of temptation or adversity, the person who has trained the mind to stay calm, the emotions to stay balanced, and the will to act with integrity holds a strength that no amount of external authority can match. This strength does not shout, it does not demand attention, it does not seek dominance. It simply is, steady and unmoved. The one who has mastered themselves cannot be thrown off course by praise or blame, by gain or loss. They are not dependent on approval to feel worthy, nor are they destroyed by rejection. Their actions come not from the need to impress, but from the desire to live in accordance with their principles. This kind of person does not lose themselves in pleasure or collapse in pain. They remain consistent. Their reactions are measured, not because they suppress emotion, but because they are not ruled by it. They have learned to feel without becoming, to experience without being overwhelmed, to care without becoming attacked. To reach this level of self-mastery requires ongoing discipline. It means resisting the pull of every impulse and training the mind to observe before it reacts. It means catching the anger before it turns into aggression, noticing the fear before it paralyzes, recognizing the ego before it speaks. This kind of awareness takes time to develop. It demands patience, honesty, and the willingness to confront one's own weaknesses without flinching. But the reward is a kind of inner freedom that cannot be granted or taken away by anyone else. In the noise of modern life, many people confuse visibility with power. They believe that being followed, feared, or envied is what gives someone strength. But these things are fragile. They depend on attention, and attention is fickle. Real power is what remains when the spotlight is gone, when no one is watching, when there is no reward on the line. It is the ability to choose stillness over reaction, truth over convenience, principle over popularity. It is the ability to look in the mirror and know you have not betrayed yourself, no matter how easy or tempting it would have been to do so. This power does not need to dominate others because it has already conquered the only battlefield that matters, the internal one. The battle against laziness, pride, fear, greed, envy, and all the small tyrants that try to govern the human heart. When you no longer obey these forces, you no longer need to prove yourself to the world. You move through it with quiet confidence, with deliberate steps, with an inner compass that does not waver with the winds of public opinion or personal emotion. Self-mastery also means knowing when to speak and when to stay silent, when to act and when to wait, when to hold on and when to let go. It means being strong enough to walk away from what does not serve your values, even when it costs you comfort or approval. It means understanding that not every battle is worth fighting, and not every impulse deserves to be acted upon. You begin to govern your life not through control, but through alignment, aligning your actions with your deeper understanding, your purpose with your behavior, your daily habits with your higher goals. The world will always present challenges, people will always bring conflict, circumstances will always shift without warning, but the one who has mastered the self can meet it all with poise. They may feel the same fear, the same doubt, the same temptation as everyone else, but they are not enslaved by it. Their decisions come from a deeper place, a place untouched by the chaos outside. In that space, true power lives not in ruling others, but in ruling the self, not in conquest, but in control, not in applause, but in quiet alignment with what is right. When you learn to detach, you do not lose life, you gain it. You stop being a prisoner of outcomes, moods, and the unpredictable turns of the world. You begin to walk with steadiness, no longer enslaved by the need to possess, to control, or to be seen. In detachment there is clarity. In clarity there is calm. And in calm there is power. The person who has nothing to prove, nothing to chase, and nothing to fear becomes unshakable. Not because the world becomes easy, but because they are no longer at its mercy. They move with quiet conviction, guided not by desire or approval, but by truth. They do not withdraw from life. They rise above it, not to escape, but to engage from a higher place. So detach not to become less, but to become more. Let go not in weakness, but in strength. For in letting go of what you never truly controlled, you begin to hold what cannot be taken, yourself, and that in the end is the most powerful thing you will ever possess.